thank you PMS Badar team and Milan, my friend, for having me here. A very different role for me, but I'm delighted to be part of this gathering here. And welcome Sunil, Jiten bhai, Nikhil, and Sachin. So, we've been, I would like to correct, I've been around for now 32 years, not 27. And in the last 32 years, I think we have remained one of the, both Sunil, me, Jiten bhai, and some other people, we have remained one of the few vocal, loud, and very positive voices on India so far. And it feels really, really nice and good to see that now the world is coming around and we are really getting recognized as a force in the world. In fact, wherever you go in the media or otherwise, India is being termed as one of the brightest spot in the world. So the topic actually is more of an economist topic, but however it is being given to me, so I would do whatever justice I can. So 5 trillion economy. So I just wanted to make sure that, before I go to my panel, some facts are being shared with you. So I would like to take this journey back to when I came in the stock market. I think rupee was at 18 and India's total GDP was $300 billion. In terms of lakh crore rupees, it was roughly 5.5 lakh crores. From there, from $300 billion, now we are close to or slightly above $3 trillion. So roughly, we have gone 10x in real dollar terms in terms of GDP. Also, the rupee, which was 18, has come to 81. So we have seen a rupee depreciation of around 4.7% over this time frame. And the nominal GDP growth rate, again, I'm not taking 2-year, 5-year, the nominal GDP growth rate for last 30 years has been 12.7%, right? So that's what gives me the 10x, 10x GDP. So the question, let me start with you, Sunil. Obviously, people are optimistic all around about India. How optimistic are you? And when do you think we achieve the $5 trillion mark?
And it's always a pleasure to be sitting with friends, colleagues, and luminaries in the Indian financial markets. And thanks everyone for staying back so late to hear us. So first a disclaimer, at least I, and I'm very sure for a lot of others, we are very optimistic and positive on India always. So even when the markets fell 30%, we were as optimistic as we were today. So, our views might be taken with a pinch of salt. But at the same time, whoever has been optimistic has always not only kept his or her health in good stead, but the wealth has also been created. Coming to the Indian economy, Madhu did mention that we have grown, 10x in 30 years, which is approximately 7-8% CAGR in dollar terms. And there is absolutely no doubt that the next 10, 15, 20 years, we can only at least match or maybe grow a little bit faster than this. Because if you actually see last 30 years, we were trying to build the blocks to create a very strong and sustainable economy. We have now everything in place. We have a great democracy. We have great demographics. We have a large domestic economy, and now we have digitization, which is making things very, very efficient. Things which we were not able to do efficiently, now we are able to do much more efficiently. It is saving a lot of time. It is saving a lot of money. Transfer of money, for example. Transfer from one place to another used to take 1 week, and we used to pay, thousands of rupees on pay order, on demand draft. Now instantly you can transfer for free. I'm just giving you a small example. Or even our tax payments and so on and so forth. So I think last 30 years with a scenario where we were building bases, we were able to grow at 8% in dollar real terms. I think we are now set. And we also have to understand that this last 30 years, the world went through multiple deep sort of issues, We have had wars, we have had multiple Lehman kind of things, and hopefully we will keep on having them, but they might not be as deep as they were earlier. So my view would be that, if you're able to do 8%, 7-8% real over the last 30 years, maybe we can grow a little bit faster over the next, 10, 15 years. And therefore, destination is clear. It's all about when, it is not whether. So we are very clear that we are going to go there, whether it takes 2027 or 28. I think that will depend on how optimistic or non-optimistic you are. I don't think anyone would doubt that we are going to $5 trillion. Optimist like me might say that 27 or 28. Someone who's pessimistic might say 29 or 30.
Point taken. Jiten bhai, just coming to you. I think it's been in the market, what has proven really very important is to really get the long-term picture right. The people who have been extremely good investors are the ones who have really got the long-term picture right and have been very, very convinced on India. And that is how they've taken advantage of the opportunity which market throws from time to time, and we see corrections, right? If I just take these 30 years, and most of us hopefully will live for the next 30 years. If I take this, do you think India has the potential to go 10x from here in the next 30 years?
Very good evening to PMS Bazaar and all of you audience here. Thank you, Madhu, and very warm welcome to all the panelists. So, Madhu, I am at a very different tangent today. While, last 2 years, I'm still attending a lot of sessions where we are talking of 5 trillion. I have very little belief that the data that is coming out is correct, because there is an entire parallel economy that is not accounted for. So I do strongly believe that we have already crossed 4 trillion, right? So I think the next leg of where we want to go is 10 trillion in 2031. So I think the roadmap has been laid very clearly. Since I have joined business, I have never seen such a, friendly and, conducive environment where interest rates are low, tax rates are stable and low for a very long time, 4 years in a row. I haven't seen a time when inflation in India is lower than in the West, and a currency which actually is stable when I compare to a basket of currencies globally. And above that, I think, no country in the world can progress till the government is with you. And I think the government is hell-bent on taking our economy to 10 trillion. And this was a vision laid out by our Honorable Prime Minister in 2019. So I think, 5 trillion to my mind is a given. I think we are putting the building blocks for 10 trillion. And I think for putting building blocks for 10 trillion, we are doing all the right things that are needed. So I think we could never have dreamt that India will make its own, microchips. We'll have the foundry coming here. We are now talking about building our own aircrafts in India. We're talking about building our own, cell phones. So we are now talking about the next leg of the tech growth in India, which I think was something we could not imagine 5-7 years back. So I think we have already arrived, and I think the most important leg of any economy in the world is you can't grow till your interest rates are actually, affording that growth. So I think with interest rates that have structurally declined, you will see, individuals now being able to afford homes like never before. So mortgage rates as a very, very affordable level. You are seeing the corporate capex is going to start. What was missing in India was the entire capex for the infrastructure, which I believe will now start in partnership with a lot of global pension funds coming in. And apart from that, I think this is the right time when you're attracting global capital. What happened to China in the 80s and 90s? It was global capital that fueled that whole boom. So I think we're absolutely at the cusp of that. So I actually am not really focusing on, the agenda today, which is 5 trillion. I think we've already laid the foundation for 10
Jiten
trillion.
bhai, that's why I asked you 30 trillion, because I know that...
So I think we are there. I think we're absolutely there. And I think, in my mind, there's no doubt, we just must see 2 more terms from our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. We need to see continuity of the reforms. And I think the mindset is so positive. And I just want to ask you one thing, Madhu, that if you remember, way back in 2006, 7 and 8, I think everybody had lost confidence in India. That's the reason Tata's put $20 billion outside of India. Mahindra's went and bought SsangYong. We had Bajaj who put up a plant in Indonesia. We had Bharat Forge who took, made many acquisitions globally. You had the Birla Group that went and put $6 billion in 2007 to acquire Novelis. And can you imagine that this round, all the capex is only India dedicated? I see between Reliance, the Adani Group and the Tatas, there's going to be at least $250 billion capex coming purely in India. Now that is a very big signal of what's going to happen in terms of employment and growth.
I'm going to come to you on that. Nikhil, just moving on. You have been one of the prominent investor in the startup space, specifically on the consumer side. And consumer is the one story which has remained more or less stable from a capital market perspective. And this is where maximum amount of value creation has also happened. So when we go from, let's say, 3 trillion to 5 trillion to 10 trillion, what is your perspective on investing? Is this going to be as prominent a story as it has been? Do you think the best in terms of returns, in terms of multiple returns, is behind us or it is ahead of us?
Yeah, so firstly, Madhu, thanks. And it's strange for Madhu to ask questions and not answer. But just a couple of points on this 5 trillion and so on, and obviously all the optimism that all of us have. Frankly, we are born like that. I just have one fundamental rule that, when everything's going your way, just stop a bit. And I'm just trying to be a skeptic about a few things. While India grows so rapidly, and obviously there seems to be a great momentum to chase this, and it's like a cockroach theory, right? You don't find few, you always find more. So I'm sure there's enough momentum to take us forward for the next 5 years and so on. But I would be really worried about a couple of things, and one is, frankly, the way...
Worry ka baat karenge baad mein. Pehle bhi, I'm saying, let's talk first about opportunity. We'll talk about the worry later.
No, clearly, I don't think there's any doubt about where we are today and where we will be in the next 5 years. I think all the opportunities that everyone's talked about pretty much is there for grabs. The good part is that in India, every fifth guy in India is an entrepreneur in his mind. So there's enough opportunity which everyone's trying to capture and build up on. There seems to be enough and more capital available in this country to take it forward. Legacy guys seem to have actually shrugged off their legacy. Like what Jiten has talked about, that if the 3 oldest groups or amongst the oldest groups in the country are spending $250 billion, obviously they're shaking the legacy, which historically they've been very reticent to do. So I think a lot of right things there in the business, in the country right now, but I'll come to the second leg in a bit.
Absolutely. There will be a section for that. Sachin, just coming to you, obviously you have been at the helm of, you've been like a poster boy for the new economy in India, grown up from a small time, created one of the largest successful companies, sold it, monetized it. And we have seen huge transformation in the last 2 years in the digital space, mainly aided by COVID and people staying at home. So, if you can talk a little bit about your journey of how you created Flipkart and what is the message, and B, also if you can talk about the digital economy, the way it is now happening, and what will it contribute to this India's journey of 3 to 5 to 10 trillion dollars.
Madhu, I'll talk a little bit about the digital, but before that, I want to cover some thoughts on how the software productivity that is underlying actually all of this. So what we are seeing is actually an explosion of productivity of engineers. I mean, when I remember when we were building Flipkart, in the early days, it was a very limited set of colleges that we used to go to. But now when I'm building my team at my next venture, I'm seeing that engineers coming from tier 2, tier 3 colleges are extremely good, right? The amount of tools that are available for them, the knowledge that they have by learning themselves is something else altogether, right? So what I'm seeing is that there is this explosion of large number of engineers, which is a very large trained workforce that is available for us to build technology businesses on top of, right? So that's what is happening. And it's a positive momentum. It's great for India because India is primarily an English-speaking country. We are able to then use our expertise to build software for the world. We are able to tap into all the knowledge that exists in the rest of the world and bring it to India as well, right? So all of that is happening at large scale, right? See, I think at a fundamental level, technology businesses are mainly basically organizing unorganized sectors, bringing productivity wherever there are pockets of unproductivity, and they are able to tap into large-scale masses in a very short period of time, right? Instead of depending on physical infrastructure, which so I think that was the learning from Flipkart, and then that's what the learning I took after exiting from Flipkart as well, to see where else I could apply it. So now I'm trying to apply that knowledge in finance, where I see similar opportunities of applying technology to bring productivity, efficiency, and organizing a sector.
Sunil, just, digging a little deeper, if you look at our economic transformation in the last, again, 20, 30 years, so we jumped from agriculture to service economy. We kind of skipped manufacturing completely, which has not been the case with a lot of countries which have actually progressed from agriculture to manufacturing predominantly. Now, with this PLI scheme of the government being in place, how confident are you that India will be able to catch up on the manufacturing side, which we have actually lost out in the last 30 years of our growth? And B, what more do you think is needed to be done on the manufacturing side, whether from the entrepreneurs or from the government side, to ensure that this overall dream of the economic momentum continues?
I think, Madhu, it's an excellent observation. So, few things, One is India is a country which have historically grown because of entrepreneurship and despite the government. And, particularly in manufacturing, you need government support. And unfortunately, last few years, that support was not as vibrant as has been recently seen. And therefore, entrepreneurs had to grow because that Josh is there in the Indian entrepreneurs, and they had to grow. So they grew on the services side. The other thing is India has been a capital-starved economy. And for manufacturing, you need much larger pools of capital than maybe when you start something on the services side. So that has been the second reason why, services always got a precedence. Agar main college se bahar nikla and I don't have 50-100 crores to set up a factory, I necessarily have to do something which is less capital intensive and which is where the services came in and which is where all the IT came in. And third is, I think Indians are blessed, maybe by God, to have great analytical minds and skills. And that is where, again, the services part, India did very, very well. So I think a combination of these three things led India to become very efficient as far as services is concerned. I think all that is changing. So first, the competition, which was China, which had low interest rates, low labor cost, and a big push from the government. I think now India also has. Jiten bhai mentioned that, cost of capital has come down in India. Earlier, even the Tatas used to borrow at 18%. Now leave the last 5-6 months away, but good corporates are able to buy at 7-8%. You have foreign capital which is willing to back manufacturing in India. Third, obviously, you also have the government through the PLI schemes, through low income tax of only 15% on new manufacturing. We are now, at least on taxation perspective, competitive as far as our neighbors are concerned in the South Asia and Asian region. And I think more importantly, with this GST and tax compliance and the digital economy, I think formal economy is much more viable than it was earlier. Earlier, if you set up a formal kind of a manufacturing facility, there would be some small scale industry which would save on taxes. because of some non-transparent practices, and you will not be in a position to do it. I think that is there. Most important, Indian economy, because it has grown from $300 billion to $3 trillion, which you mentioned, in most of the products and I would say commodities or even consumer products, India has a large domestic manufacturing market, which makes it viable to produce here. So if you take mobiles, we are the largest consumer of mobiles. So it is very natural that you produce here. And now with this ecosystem, you are able to produce. And now the last and the most important thing is that slowly the world wants to diversify out of China. We can say that China to some extent is a very unfriendly country for most of the countries. And this China plus one or whatever you call it is for real. We saw one bearing company announce only a 500-600 crores of capex and the stock went up by 20% because that is the trend of things to come. So if more and more companies globally are going to start to see India as an alternative manufacturing base, I think which is going to be there. And that's why this 30 years, 10 times, I think we will take much lower than 30 years because now we also will have the manufacturing which will kick in.
Sure. But Sunil, would you say the prominence which we have acquired in services in the world, because obviously we are the service tool for the whole world, do you see we acquiring same kind of prominence, whatever time it takes in manufacturing, because that will change the whole country?
So, all of us have visited a lot of factories, all of us have met a lot of entrepreneurs. I think Indian entrepreneurs have a lot of josh. We still have entrepreneurs who work 16, 18 hours. In Europe, it's 35 hours a week. They don't care. I think Friday evening, all the pubs are full. Saturday, Sunday is for golf or skiing or whatever you are. I think Indian entrepreneurs still have that thing. Second is we are blessed with a lot of natural resources. So, if you want to have garments, we have our own cotton. Why do we export cotton? Why do we have to export yarn? We should be exporting to the Nikes out of here. We have our own metals. So why do we have to export metal? We can make it converted into machinery and export from here. So I think India has a lot of those advantages. All it needs is that ecosystem to be developed. I think 25% of Apple phones are now made in India, Apple iPhone. I was in US in one conference and my fellow panelist, an American, he pulled out his mobile Apple 14 and he showed it that this is made in India. It was such a proud feeling. So I think that ecosystem is building, and once the ecosystem starts, बोलते हैं ना engine जब ये एक बार वो train से निकलती है ना, starting में slow होती है, but it needs to get out of that station for it to pick up pace, and I think that is where we are.
Sure. Jiten bhai, now coming to the point like you briefly touched upon, I know that you are being a long investor in India and extremely well connected with a lot of prominent business houses in India. How is that mood changing? Because to somewhat that mood was very sober for last 10 years. People were not wanting to commit capex, they did not want to borrow money. And even because of the regulatory environment which was there, things were not as optimistic. Obviously, we are seeing that change in the last 2 years. What are you hearing from large, prominent business houses? And when do you think we are going to see reversal of people saying that जो 20 बिलियन बाहर डाला था वो पैसा लेके आने का है और बाहर से और पैसा लाके यहाँ लगाने का है?
So, Madhu, most important thing is money comes only when there is growth and confidence both. So I think for a change, I think the belief that people have in our own country is at an all-time high. This year, if you see in Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, I'm so proud that, being an Indian, I'm happy to say that we sold thousands of crores of rupees worth of flags across the country. Everybody was having a flag in his hand, hoisting it very proudly in his house. So I think this is the mood change for the people of India. If you come to the industrialists, I think everybody, when there was crony capitalism years ago, thought that let's go and diversify. You see what has happened to the Tatas. They're pulling out of chorus. They are bleeding in Jaguar Land Rover. Bajaj has exited Indonesia. Mahindras have sold out their SsangYong. Bharat Forge has shut out all its units. I think we have, done with all the experiments that we want to. And I think there's nothing greater than what you're seeing here as a belief in a market of 1.4 billion people, where the government is with you and the government is providing you with all the ingredients to actually deliver that growth. So in my view, what we are seeing is, I think a few years back, it all began with disbelief. Everybody thought it's a flash in the pan. I haven't seen a period of 4 years where, fiscal deficits have moved from 3.5% to 9.5%, but the government has kept the tax rate stable. So they're sending you a very strong signal that please remain invested, please plow back all your savings into industry, grow, create jobs. And I think, most of the entrepreneurs today are very excited with the opportunity that is unfolding across, whether it's in the traditional businesses where there's consolidation, whether it's in the new age companies where there's a huge growth still impending, whether it's an export opportunity that is unfolding to the magnitude we can't imagine. So I think it's not about the frustration of what's happened in Russia and China alone, but I think it's also the welcoming stance and the relationships that our government has built with all our allies in the West. So today, I think the whole world is having that confidence. Not only the Indians are having it in the businesses in India, the global world is very proud of what's happening in India. So to my mind, the mood is very optimistic. I think the commitments are very high. And I think we will be very surprised in a couple of years from today when we see all these investments fructifying. So I think it's very, very positive. Everybody says that there is a key man risk. That's the risk that people are monitoring. But in my view, I think, all the reforms, Madhu, I have seen in India, very, very difficult to implement, but equally difficult to reverse. So if you have GST now, you're not going to go back to, collecting excise. If you've got a faceless, taxation system, you're not going to go back to where you were earlier. So very difficult to, get there, but very, very difficult to reverse. So in a few years' time, when all the building blocks have set in, I think the risk of Modi ji not being at the helm to lead the country keeps decreasing year after year. But I think at the moment, that's the only risk I see. But people are very, very jubilant because I think for the first time, you're seeing that kind of a genuine intent of the government, which we haven't seen in 70 years, 75 years.
Fair enough. I'll just come back, Nikhil, Jiten again. Nikhil, just coming back, and we will talk about what can go wrong in India. There will be a separate section on that, and I'll allow you to lead that section. Because I just see that, business traditionally has been the privilege of the top 20, 30 industrial houses in India, if I look at when we started, right? But now things have changed. We are talking of startup, we are talking of entrepreneurs like Sachin Bansal, who have come in and have created huge amount of wealth. You are at the helm of it. You have the real pulse as to, what is this aspiration of the startup entrepreneurs? What are they looking for? So what do you see this as folding up, and how will change India, and the amount of excitement which we can see from outside in the startup world? Obviously, for every 100 companies, only 2 of them succeed, or 5 of them succeed and make it really big, and 95 fail. So can you talk a little bit really more about how this space is changing and how it will aid to India's growth?
No, so, if we look at bigger data point, right? Look at Fortune 500 companies in 1960s and look at the same list today. 90% of Fortune 500 companies have died or become irrelevant over a decadal cycle. And it's quite strange because these are the best endowed companies in the world in terms of management, scale, capability, execution, capital, revenues, profits, and so on. And yet they fail. It just shows that legacy and success also has its own baggage. And none of them fail because of competition. They just fail because they fail to see a trend change. And that's really the big opportunity for newer entrepreneurs or people like Sachin, who obviously led that journey and so on. I think in the Indian context, all the more true that you will see a lot more entrepreneurship evolve. You're already seeing the first flush of it happen over the last decade. Just to symbolize that, it's like saying that if 10 years back or 20 years back, no one even dared to compete against a Unilever. So if Unilever said that they are getting into oral care, Colgate stock would fall. That's no longer true anymore. No one cares about Unilever. No one has a mortal fear of taking on Unilever. So the legacy challenges are now, frankly, something which most entrepreneurs are willing to take and take it headlong. Also, it's coming at a right time in India where, like I always think, brand loyalty is at an all-time low, brand awareness is at an all-time high, which is a great case for disruption to happen. It's also coming at a time when, I think the incremental ability for entrepreneurs to identify niches is becoming very high. And when brand loyalty drops off, platforms become very relevant. And that's why you see a lot of new age businesses which are really platform built becoming very relevant and large in India. It's not really brands, but it's platforms which have become the new age brands. So I do see a lot of opportunities which will evolve in various segments, and you're starting to see the first signs of that happen. Obviously, the only challenge is that how long that sustains, but like Madhu said, it's a different agenda to have. I just have one point that, one thing which we all should be very cognizant is that if earlier successful businesses were meant for 50, 60 years, successful businesses now are meant for 20 years at best. So there is a finite life curve. If that's true for businesses, it's true for countries also. So we need to be very, very cognizant that there's a finite curve, and like Jiten said, maybe there is an opportunity and there is a willingness, and you're seeing that track change. I think this is possibly the best years for India, for us to become that breakout, and for us to become that 10% of those Fortune 500 companies or countries which will actually live through the journey and not die within the tenure that we're looking at.
Sure. Sachin, the similar question to you, you've been kind of a poster boy, as I told earlier, of this new age startup ecosystem, came from nothing and really created something worthwhile. How are you seeing, obviously you must be in touch with many of your friends, colleagues, people who are even now starting up, and I hear that you are also a very active investor on the startup ecosystem. How are you seeing it develop, and how has it changed, and what is it likely to contribute to India's growth?
A lot of action happening. We see companies which are taking on big problems, whether it is mobility, finance, education. Of course, a lot of work has already happened in shopping. Not a lot of work yet in healthcare, I would say. I think yet to happen over there. But yeah, I think see, the one big change that I've seen over the last 15 years or so of my journey is that the quality of the teams that start up, or the quality of the teams that are available, or quality of people that are available for you to join at a very early stage is improved tremendously, right? So earlier on, I remember back in 2008-07, when people used to start up, generally people were not, it was generally looked down upon, right? If you're coming from a good college, good education background, if you're starting up, कि नौकरी नहीं मिली होगी, इसीलिए company शुरू कर रहे हैं, right? So, but now it's the other way around. The quality of entrepreneurs is very good. The best people in India coming from good colleges, good companies, they are willing to join, take funds, take ESOPs, right? So a lot of that has happened in this space. And as I said, apart from that, developer productivity has gone up. So with a very small team, you can to quickly build out a product, at least the first version of it, be out in the market, test the market, see how the customers are behaving, and then iterate on top of that with the larger team over time, right? So, and the capital, of course, is just is a lot of capital available now for startups. So yeah, I think it's a great time. I would say it will be transformative. My belief is that Indian companies eventually will go global. Of course, there are some early signs. Nothing meaningful yet has come out of India and gone global from a technology space yet, but I think eventually it will happen sooner or later. Yeah, I think it's a great story.
Sunil, just see, one of the things which is there in the world today is that significant part of the world is surrounded with a lot of worries, like whether it is Europe, China, and people are talking of near-term recession, even in the US. Is it to my mind, it's a real opportunity for India that we'll be able to capture. Do you share that view? And B, do you see any near-term headwind for India because of what is happening globally? If I take a let's 12, 18-month view.
No, I think there is absolutely no doubt that the world is a worrying kind of a place as we speak. Multiple issues. Obviously, you have the geopolitical tensions with, I always have this, that 2008, we had the layman crisis, LEH, and then MAN, men. Now the world has he-man crisis, he and men, because most of the leaders are like really he-mans. Mr. Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping, earlier Trump, Mohammed bin Salman, they are very, very strong personalities. And when you have such strong personalities, those एकदम strong personality वाले होते हैं तो थोड़ा लफड़ा तो होता ही है. So I think the world is full of very strong personalities, and I think geopolitical tensions will continue. Then you also have excesses which happen, and when excesses happen, which is free money being doled out, which was necessary at that point of time, you also have to go through excessive pain, which is what is happening in a lot of parts of the world. And both have got combined in some regions, like Europe has got hit by both. You have geopolitical issues, therefore gas and all those things are being an issue. And then you also have this added problem of inflation and higher interest rate. The good thing about India is, statistical. So our interest rates went up from 6.25% to 7.25%. So it was 15% increase in interest rates. In Europe, interest rates went up from 0% to 3%, which is infinite interest rate increase. In US, it went up from 1% to 4%, which is 300% increase in interest rates. Inflation for us went up from maybe 5% to 7%. We have lived with 7-8% inflation for years. For them, from 0.5% inflation, it became 9 or 10%. So they have not lived with that. So I think there is a little bit of issue in terms of demand, which we are already seeing, particularly in the Eurozone, because a big portion of their household expense is now going in maybe gas or the basic thing. And I think if you see the results which have come in September, a lot of companies which had significant sales coming from Europe have been the ones which have got impacted the most because of demand going down. The other thing which the world is facing is huge volatility. So again, I have this notion that in the world, 20% move in any asset class used to happen once in maybe 2-3 years, whether it was commodities, whether it was currency, whether it was equity markets. Now annually you have 2-3 instances of 20% swings. So, commodities going up and down by 5-10%, any manufacturer can, plan for it or even bear it. Commodities going up 50% and then falling 50%, which promoters and entrepreneur is going to be able to match it? So, sometimes we also get aggressive with the promoters. Yaar, aapne bola tha, guidance diya tha, aaya nahi. But you imagine from the promoters or the entrepreneur's perspective, managing demand and this and that. So the world is definitely going to be volatile, right? And that is the negative part of it. The good thing is we all know it. And what we all know never has an impact.
Sunil, the moot point is, in the medium term, will it be a big opportunity for India, or it will continue to be a big challenge?
So the good thing about the opportunity in India is that we are 80-82% domestic. And therefore, in the scenario where the world is struggling, whether they will grow at 0% or there will be a recession, the question in India is whether we'll grow at 6.5% or 7%. So the opportunity is clearly visible. There's domestic economy and the 35 lakh or 3 crore, I don't know how many weddings, and we like to spend on festivals and all. I think that is clearly visible. And that domestic economy is ensuring that even in the world struggling, we are growing at 6.5-7%. If the world comes back to normalcy, there is no doubt we'll start to grow at 8%. So the thing, it's very clearly visible.
Sure. Jiten bhai, you've been one of the investors who have really invested in a lot of good quality companies and very, very early on, like Asian Paint, Pidilite, and I know a few of them. Obviously, I don't know a lot. And you have seen this journey of India over the last 20, 30 years. You have seen a lot of these companies go down 50%, not make returns for an extended period of time, and then again make a lot of money. So, a lot of people money for themselves and they also are managing money for their clients. What gives you that kind of conviction when the going is not so good? What do you remind yourself that yes, this is a good company and hopefully it will come back? And what gives you what kind of preparations do you do before really investing in these kind of companies so that you are able to take a 5, 10, 20, because that is what the crux of investing is, right?
Sure. So, Madhu, I think it's investing, the greatest lesson we all have learned from our, founders is that the more inactive you are, the more returns you generate. Once you're with the right businesses, I think you need to be inactive about this. Your faith and trust needs to be on the promoter and the business. Second is, I think, we have seen a lot of the pain of the last couple of years because India went through a complete restructuring. Modi ji's first 5 years were actually about cleaning up the economy. It was about a slowdown because of demonetization, GST, RERA, a lot of things. I think this is the 5 years where we are seeing them putting building blocks. But I think when India goes through a major transformation like it is going through right now, looking at the past, because we have been prone to crony capitalism for 67 years before we saw a new government, NDA, coming in. And I think during that period, if companies have done well, they've survived, they've created great brands, distribution, I think this is the start of a very, very big journey. I think your belief in the promoter, your belief in the marketplace, your belief in the kind of leadership that these companies have demonstrated is a single reason to basically stay invest in high quality businesses. And I think like Sunil pointed out, I think, the world is very prone to raw material volatility. It's very prone to currency volatility. And a lot of corporate profits have been affected. But I think the most important thing is that, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So we have seen these companies bouncing back time and again. So in my view, I think those who have demonstrated leadership, those who have respected capital, those who have actually worked in favor of minority shareholders, these are the people we believe are the long-term value and wealth creators. And nothing, I think, will come in our way to see that continuing. We keep asking as to, where is the next Pidilite or where is the next Asian Paints? But I think it's going to be Pidilite and Asian Paints only that's going to create value next 20 years. So I think we need to be patient with it.
So, Sachin, before I go to Sachin, just, one point on this fintech industry as a whole. I know that you are creating this new company, NAVI Technology, right, wherein you have invested significant portion of your wealth in this company, and it is going public also. So, can you talk a little bit about this space? What gives you the courage and the conviction to invest 75–80% of your total wealth into this space, and how do you see it evolving in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, Madhu. So the fintech space is extremely attractive right now. See, financial services hasn't seen this impact of technology except for certain pockets, I would say, right? Like payments, for example, we have seen a rise of PhonePe, Google Pay, or in online brokerages like Zerodha. But apart from that, at the core of it, at the heart of it, we haven't seen that major impact of technology yet, right? Whether it's banking, lending, insurance, asset management, etc. Right? So we're still there are startups, but most of the startups are kind of like, I would say, dancing around the main topic, right? It's not really, they are not attacking and going head on and taking it on. They're trying to stay out of the regulatory purview. So I would say that I think if there is somebody, there are some companies which are trying to do that, which are willing to get their hands dirty, which are willing to take on the challenge, which are willing to get inside the regulatory environment, for example, and then apply technology or apply modern techniques, right, like machine learning and stuff like that, into this space. There are a lot of big problems to be solved, a lot of inefficiencies waiting to be removed. Productivity can be brought in and value can be created. massive value can be created. So that's what I'm betting on. And of course, I mean, I think majority of the financial services revenues are insurance and lending. So that's what the core of our business is, primarily lending. So, but yeah, I think it's very exciting. It's from an opportunity perspective, it's super exciting.
But just, one point in this, that, when you are building a lending book, it is also about your ability to attract liabilities and loans from various banks and institutions who are lending. And what we have seen in the last 5-10 years, a lot of these startup fintech companies have not been able to attract credible liability. How difficult you are finding, because you have been at it for last 3-4 years, how difficult it has been for you to convince a lot of these big banks to lend you? And how do you see, when your size becomes really large, how do you see it panning out? Because that is the crux of success of the fintech venture, right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think because money is the raw material that you're lending, right? And the cost of the raw material is what decides how competitive you are in the marketplace eventually. So I think it's an important point. Most of the startups end up not with very good ratings when they start off. They start off with a high double or high teens kind of borrowing rates. Then they end up doing mostly subprime lending, and they kind of get then stuck in a loop, right? Then they can't come out of it. Right? So that is a problem. But I think thankfully for us, what happened is that we have been able to convince partners. We have been able to show the quality of the operations that we have created. We have been able to create a lot of trust, right? So as of today, we are sitting on close to $1 billion of borrowings at a very competitive rates. That's because of the track record, right? And of course, it took time, right? It's a 4-year-old company now with just 1 million customers. But I mean, in any other, if you were outside the regulatory purview, I would have expected a lot more customers than 1 million customers. But this is it is slightly slower, but I think but it can be done. It just requires patience and keeping at it.
Got it. Keeping time in mind, Sunil, काम की बात करते हैं. $5 trillion तो हो गया. That, obviously all of us want to benefit out of this $3 to $5 to $10 trillion. So hand to heart, and not a media question, right? What are the 3 themes which you will really bet on, which you are very certain that will really generate returns for investors in India? Whether you talk of sectors or themes, whatever you want to talk. 3 of them.
So it's always very difficult, but based on what I see today, so our whole way of living has changed quite dramatically. What we used to spend on, how we used to spend on is completely changed, and even the propensity to spend has changed. I think India has room for many more homegrown brands. I'm taking Nikhil's sector away, but not every one of us is going to migrate directly to the Armanis and the others of the world. So I think a lot of India-focused brands, I think there's huge opportunity. Whether they will be the household brands, building materials, textiles, shoes, I don't know. I think lot of opportunities. I think we should not ignore any of them. And the good thing is that some of the smaller companies are still available at 15, 18 P multiples. You don't have to be in the large companies which are trading at 80, 90 P multiples. These are like really 17, 18 P multiple companies. I think that is one thing. Financials will always be an opportunity in India, but we have seen the run-up which we have seen over the last few months. I think this was a sector which was waiting to just explode. There is still a lot of opportunities there. Only thing you rightly mentioned that liability is a big thing. So just focus on the good brands which can attract the deposits. And I would say the last thing is manufacturing, which we all know, and that it is going to do well. Still early days, But if
Within manufacturing, do you like anything in particular where disproportionate opportunity for wealth creation?
yeah, so just focus on companies where the gross value add is very high. So, if you have 100 as your sale price and say 50 as your raw material price, I think the operating leverage is huge. So, if your turnover doubles, your PAT just becomes 4 or 5x. Because there is such huge operating leverage in these companies. And it's early days. Companies are like what, 200, $300 million in sales. Why can't they become $2, $3 billion in sales? So, if you're asking me for a 15, 20-year question, I think I would say this is the thing. But very near term, unfortunately, everyone is so much information, everyone is acting at the same time. Defense का theme निकला 3 महीने में सब 3-4 गुना हो गए share. So in the absolute near term, I don't know whether they will work. But from a 10, 15, 20-year perspective, some of the companies which have really mastered this manufacturing at very efficient cost.
15-20 साल का तो investing का बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. I'm saying we are talking of more like 3 to 5 years. What will
Yeah, so
really work within manufacturing?
I would still say that domestic, brands, finance, and digital economy we can't ignore. I know the last 6 months have been very rough. I would say because of mispricing rather than anything else. But digital economy is something which you just can't ignore. I am very sure the world will bounce back as far as the digital or the platform companies are concerned. And in India, the growth for those companies in the next 3-5 years will be humongous.
We'll take that input from Sachin. Yeah, Nikhil, just coming to you now. 2 questions. Obviously, we talked about what all could go right. And you took a lead that we need to be cognizant of few factors which could go wrong in this India story. So if you can talk about that. And also, the similar question to you. What are your best investing themes for, whether they are in the startup space or the listed space over the next 3 to 5 years?
So, one couple of areas which are, like I said, when everything is going right, you just want to just stop and rethink. And I am as bullish as anyone of us out here. I think, one is...
But it's good to be, in every prospectus there are risk factors. So we have to also highlight the risk factors.
So, one element which I'm slightly skeptical about, and Sachin's also here, so it's good to get his view if possible, is that I think the entrepreneurs of today are, to me, frankly, they are not there in it for a very, very long haul. So entrepreneurs they're fantastic, they're great entrepreneurs, and that's what we are betting on. We've set up 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝑉entures, which is betting on early stage consumer entrepreneurs and so on. But I can't see them carrying on the journey for the next 30 years or 50 years. I really can't see that. Maybe there'll be few exceptions, but like I always believe, exceptions don't make the rule. The irony is that, when you are investing, fundamentally you're investing in kick-ass founders, which India has, in a big-ass market, which India is, with a smart-ass product, which I'm sure most of the entrepreneurs have found that curve to crack that category. But I can't see them sustaining over a period of time. And the irony is that when you look at a situation which you are in today and make that as a symbolic about what it will be in the next few years, when you look at all these unicorns which have got listed and so on, and look at how price damages happen, I think it takes the wind away from ability of lot of investors to fund disproportionate capital to create longevity in businesses. A lot of these businesses are about changing habits. If Nykaa raised capital or Paytm raised money or Policybazaar did it and so on, all these guys were there because they changed habits of how consumers go. And to change habits in India is a tough one. Consumers are a very stubborn animal. They don't change habits. So you need to incentivize them to change habit, which takes a lot of capital. And by the time they change habits, I think most of the entrepreneurs feel that it's possibly time to monetize, and which is perfectly legit to do it. But I can't see them continuing for the next journey of this. So my challenge is that when a lot of excess capital will not come in for survival of these new age businesses, the ability to take bigger risks is going to get limited. And then you have the other option, which is saying that legacy guys should then become the risk takers. Because if they have to lead the next 8-9% of GDP growth in India, they'll have to take the bigger risk. They have historically not shown that ability to take disproportionate risk. They're very good at what they do, but they've never shown disproportionate risk. So I feel that is a challenge in India over a period of time. And in terms of opportunities of businesses to invest in, I think India is still a low-income country in the overall scheme of things. We'll hopefully move from, rather we are a poor economy, which will move to a low income to a mid-income country. If we move to mid-income, I think there is a huge wave of consumption patterns which will emerge in India over the next decade and two, and that is a very sustainable one. Because as you move low or poor to low income group to middle income, I think the propensity to spend goes disproportionate. And thereby there are a lot of products which start to originate and become relevant. It could be, frankly, eating out becomes huge. I'm not talking about Zomato, Swiggy and so on. It could be that, but if you look at the next 5-10 years, I think that could become a big wave. It could be about health and fitness, which again I think will become huge because people will start to take a lot more care of themselves. It could be about just travel. I think there will be a lot of businesses which will be made. Could be about health consciousness and thereby the products that they consume. Could be about lifestyle products and so on. So I think there are a lot of opportunities which will come in categories like this, which will be very sustainable over a period of time.
Jitin bhai, paisa kidhar banega?
I think, Madhu, पैसा तब बनेगा जब हमारी belief होगी. And I think
belief का तो 1 घंटा बात कर लिया जितिन भाई.
So I think we are all living in 67 years of being used to crony capitalism. I think the change is so big, and when I see Indians don't talk about two things nowadays, and that is food security. We are so blessed. I think the world is going through a food crisis. I think the second thing is 2 billion sort of vaccinations administered.
Sorry, अपन macro बात कर लिया. We are talking about.
So if you ask me, so I think the way is very clear. We will, I think discretionary consumption will, reward investors very well. So we believe that as we go from $2,500 to $5,000, huge spends will be there on discretionary consumption. Financialization, I think, we believe private banks will really flourish from here on. And lastly, I think the theme to play will be outsourcing.
Outsourcing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you. Sachin, just very briefly touching upon, see the investor presence of this new age technology companies has been extremely poor, and a lot of people have lost money, like, whether it is on the listing from highs from Zomato or Paytm or Policybazaar. A lot of these companies, from the price they listed and the highs they made, had destroyed a lot of capital for investors. I hope NAVI changes that trend and you create wealth. You have any thoughts that you would like to share briefly on this, on the valuation of these companies and how you are thinking about it?
Yeah, I think as Nikhil was talking about, right? So there are, I mean, picking the right companies is very critical, right? Because starting a company in the tech sector is easy. So there will always be thousands of companies trying to solve the same problems. Of course, not everybody will make it. Not everybody will have the right mindset to go through the long haul. Not everybody will be as committed to making money for the shareholders. Right. So I think it's very important to segregate. But I think, but I would say, Madhu, what I've seen so far is that entrepreneurs who have scaled well in this space so far most of them have had the right mindset. I think maybe on the latter note, I will say that we should wait for Bangalore companies to start going to public markets first. I think when Bangalore companies come, it will be a different story altogether. I would say that there is a different DNA.
We look forward to that, Sachin. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just because we are running out of time, just as a conclusion, I would also give 2 pennies of my words. I think, I've been around for 30 years, and what has really worked for is the belief in India. Is that, you have to truly believe that this is a country which, in spite of all the problems, the zeal of entrepreneurs and their ability to stick to businesses and that what Sunil was saying, यहाँ तो लोग ये देखते हैं कि 24 में 25 घंटा क्यों नहीं होता है. यहाँ पे people are not looking कि we have 7 hours or 6 hours of work and we want to relax. So I think if we believe in India, then that is the first and most important thing. The other thing which I observe, that in the last few years, specifically under the leadership of Modi ji, the prominence which we are getting in geopolitical matter, like, it would have been impossible to emphasize an Indian Prime Minister will be G20 leader. It has never, at least in the recent past I have been around, it has never ever happened. So that is basically we are buying oil from Russia. On one hand, we are buying weapons from Russia, and the other hand, America is coming on the stage and saying India is our best friend, and they are both fighting with each other. So that, in a way, gives the kind of prominence which this country is getting, and I believe that the best is yet to come from India when we go, and that's why I took a 30-year horizon. Like if we go from $3 trillion to $30 trillion, so you can imagine the wealth creation which has happened in the last 5,000 years. We have created a $3 trillion market cap. Like what the possibility which lies in the next 20, 30 years. And we may think that 20, 30 years is a very long period of time, but in investing, the people who have really made money, they have taken that time of that kind of horizon and time. Having said this, there will always be dips as the nature of the markets are. We will see geopolitical tension, we will see oil price going to $120, we will see some kind of a political instability and times to come in the next 20, 30 years. All of this will happen. But I would say, stay convinced on India, stay convinced on equity. Equity has been an asset class which has beaten every other asset class, be it real estate, be it fixed income, be it gold, in a longer period of time. And I see that is unlikely to change. So thank you so much for being patient, really appreciate it. And thank you PMS Bazaar and Milind for giving us this opportunity.